In his final chapter of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen R Covey talks about a time that he went on a sabbatical to Hawaii with his family. And he wandered into a library, a book caught his eye. He pulls the book out and he reads a paragraph that introduces to him the simple idea that there is a gap, a space between stimulus and response. He'd been raised to learn and know about the fact that you can make your own decisions and self-empowerment. But the way that this particular paragraph was phrased was very mind-altering to him. You know, a lot of times we hear that, you know, the teacher comes to us when the student is looking, that a particular book will speak to us from where we are. And so in this time of sabbatical, in this peaceful time where he's going and writing in a little house near the water and all that other fun stuff, he reads this paragraph and decides to reflect on it. And as he reflects on it, as he stands in that gap, as he stands in that space, as he recognizes it, becomes self-aware of the fact that between the stimulus and the response is where he can be, where his mind can be, where the decision happens. He started to make changes. And he realized that the more he looked at that space, the more he realized he could even change the stimulus, which seems almost like time control when you pause and think about it, that if you spend enough time in the place where you get to make the decision, you can even change what's going to happen to you. Pretty wild thought to think about. So in that same time, and as he's realizing this, he decided to have deeper communication with his wife. So he and his wife on a daily basis would jump into a car or what he calls his trail cycle and just head off for an hour towards a secluded beach that they would go to. Their kids would sit with them on this vehicle and they would drive out to this beach talking the whole way. The kids would sit in the back just enjoying the scenery, and they would sit on the beach and talk for a couple of hours and then drive back. Like that was their afternoon every day. And he said as they began talking, initially it was all superficial. You know, how's your day been? How'd the writing go today? What were the kids like this morning? And because of the length of time that they spent in this communication, the conversation became deeper and deeper and deeper. And they started hitting upon raw feelings and emotions and things that hadn't come out in their marriage for quite some time that needed to. They started developing some rules. One rule was no probing. Like you had to just let the person talk about what they felt comfortable talking about. And many times this would leave like loose ends, you know, tales of stories that you didn't know the answer to and that you wanted to get back to and you wanted to dig in and you wanted to find out more, but that was manipulative and controlling and it became about you instead of about them. And if you just sat in the empathy, that it became a very trusting place and built great trust in the relationship to just sit in empathy, to learn and to understand from each other. So he writes that the most fruitful times happen in these moments where their vulnerability would touch. I had a mentor one time that says, or often says, that which is most vulnerable is most universal. And as their vulnerability touched in this place, this is where the relationship grew the most, because they realized that many of the places they were vulnerable, their spouse was vulnerable as well. He talks about a Frigidaire story where he's been irritated almost their whole marriage that his wife was so insistent upon buying Frigidaire appliances every time an appliance would break. He thought it was a waste of money and a waste of time as they went looking for the right Frigidaire appliance in all sorts of different places. And in these drives, he realized and talked to her and brought it up, and he got it off of his chest finally. And as they sat in that silence, and she began to come back to why the Frigidaire, he learned that it was a very vulnerable time in her life and her father's life, and with her as a child when he was having a tough time at work, and the Frigidaire company would actually finance his inventory during the hard times so that way he could sell it before paying for it and then pay them back. And she had such a brand loyalty to Frigidaire because they were so loyal to her family during these tough times in her life, that's why it's always been that way. And here Stephen R Covey was just thinking it was a frivolous decision. So sometimes even those frivolous, trivial pieces in our lives have very deep sentiment and deep cores that it's a great thing to explore, to understand, seek first to understand and then to be understood, and then to come together in unity with each other. He mentioned that one of the really fun things for him was that his children were in the back as they were driving, and they were able to witness this healthy communication, this no probing, this when it got too painful, stop. And if we come back to it, we come back to it. And oftentimes they didn't necessarily come back to it because some of those loose ends you realize in the long-term scheme of things aren't very important. But as his children witnessed this very healthy communication, he knew that they were setting up good foundations for communication in their lives. Because as the book talked about, there's so many different times in our lives that the unhealthy paradigms that we've grown up with, the unhealthy scripts, and how we react to our significant others and our family members and others that we care for, maybe the yelling, in some cases hitting, things being thrown, shutting off, shutting down, hiding, leaving. Those unhealthy paradigms and scripts are often ones that we carry with us and we take into new relationships and we take into other places. So he's excited that his children were seeing some of these healthy ones, and even more excited that, again, this paragraph, this concept, that what happens between the stimulus and the response is our proactivity, our decision. We can choose what to do, and how empowering it is to be able to grow up and know that, and to be able to make that decision where you are. I posted a quote on Facebook today, which just talks about how the strength of an exercise comes from doing. And the more you do, the more power you have in being able to do it. That consistency is key. And so in the same place, the more you are self-aware that when something happens to you, you can pause and you can decide what it is that you are going to do in response, if you do anything at all, and how you respond. And the more you visualize and look towards the future as to what you want your life to be like, and knowing what you want your life to look like and what you want your life to be like, if you use that to influence the decision that you're about to make, is this the person that I want to be? Am I who I want to be as I respond to this situation, to this stimulus? And then we run through the rest of the 7 habits, right? Like that's where the fun comes from. So we flip in the book, you look at some of the graphs that I've posted. We're being proactive and making a decision at that point. We're visualizing who we want to be and beginning with the end in mind. We're prioritizing that visualization because we've listed our priorities. We know what we want to do. We know what needs to come first. We think win-win. Is the decision that I'm making about me, or is it a win-win and no deal? Are we seeking first to understand and then to be understood in our response as we pause before we respond? And then are we looking to build unity in the situation? How are we synergizing? How are we working together? That's it, y'all. That's the book. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Take a pause. Get comfortable in that silence. Be comfortable in that moment. And learn to take a step forward and move forward in such a way that your habits will be great. So tomorrow, last day of the 66-day habit challenge. I'm excited that we've come this far on this journey, and super excited to hear how everybody's doing on their own. See you again here tomorrow. Thanks.